Alrighty, folks, it's official. It's worse than 2008. It looks like home builders are starting to panic. We're going to talk about this with Matt, the lumberjack landlord, but it's very clear that builders have changed their opinion. For a long time, they were saying pace over profit. That is now stopped. They are now being far more stringent on what they are building. And you've seen some home builders, their backlog fall 35%. I think this is a great thing, but some folks might tell you they're panicking. Matt, what say you? What's going on?
Not panicking. It's interesting. I mean, it's so funny. I think it's snowflakes that come up with titles because everything is hyperbole. Everything has to be so explosive and oh my gosh, what are we doing? And I think what's really funny is that, I talk to my buddies. I know two friends that own construction companies. One of them is massive. It's an absolutely massive company. And he said, we're not really seeing it. He said, we saw a big slowdown during the election.
Yeah.
He said during the election, we saw a big slowdown. He goes, a lot of developers were very concerned then. He goes, they were much more concerned than they are now. He goes, they were scared then. He goes, if they thought that if she got in, that it was going to be an absolute nightmare. Yeah. And so they didn't. And so literally they took all the plans that they had, they got those back on track, and then they actually doubled down. And they did more. So I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing, I'm in Nashville now for the holidays, and I'm seeing cranes in construction. I can tell you that I probably in the suburbs of Nashville, I probably drove past 30 developments that are under construction. 30, wow. Not 3, 30.
Wow.
And we're talking earth moving, we're talking stick building, we're talking all sorts of crazy things like that. And then again, talking with my buddies that own the construction companies, they said that, they don't have a 6-month book of business like they used to, but they still have about a 2 to 3 month book of business. And they said it's pretty healthy. None of those contractors or none of those companies have gotten behind on paying. The one big difference is they used to, when things were on fire, they were building entire, 14 to 24 house developments all at once.
Right.
And now they're doing it more like 2 to 4 at a time. And they said, and that's just because they recognize what happened. That you can tell that guy was a guy who lived through 08.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I see going on. And it's really interesting because obviously my audience knows, this. I've been trying to add a property in Vegas, likely going to be a new build. And obviously I shared with the audience that I was really close on getting a 3-unit deal from Lennar for 20 points off. Since that conversation, I've had other smaller builders reach out to me and offer similar things. So I do think there are some areas of town. And again, I don't think the builders are panicking. Let's be clear.
Right.
And again, I lived through the 08 crisis, and I saw in Fresno, California was decimated.
Yes, it was.
In that, 75% collapse. So decimated. It's very different this time. I think what we're seeing is to your point, there's just not as many builders this time as last time, right?
Yep.
We had a lot of builders in the 08 crisis that would do, 100-unit subdivisions. And they were seemingly everywhere. And then suddenly now there's 4 of them, right? That survived. So there's that. But I think the biggest change I'm seeing in builders is they're picking the communities to, I'll say, unload, focus on whatever you want.
Yeah. Yep.
Because they want to move into other areas that are performing. So I think that I wouldn't call it panic. I would call it strategic.
Yeah.
And again, for a builder, they don't get reliquefied until that property sells, right? Everything's one way until the very end. So I think what we're seeing is builders be far more strategic, pick markets that they want to be in and frankly out of. And I think it's just good business.
I agree. I think that it's one of the things that, many people that are watching this have never run a company before. And so cash flow is extremely important. Usually guys that have run companies before, right? We focus a lot on cash flow. When you're responsible for P&L, which is profit and loss of an organization, you care very much about cash flow because you are worried about making sure that all ends get met and everybody
payroll
gets paid. Exactly. Everybody gets paid. And so one of the interesting things that I'm seeing now is exactly like what you said, which was before everything was calibrated to this crazy speed. And it was like, if you build it, they will come. The rest doesn't matter. Like, we just need to get this
pace over profit.
Done. Exactly. Pace over profit. Exactly. And now it's much more, okay, it's not crazy anymore. A lot of these guys have welcomed that and said, it's not insane anymore.
Yeah.
And they've gone back to, okay, now we can basically do our fine tuning because we got kind of sloppy in the last few years. Made a ton of money, but got a little bit sloppy, and so now
Mhm.
everything is fine tuning and dialing it in and making sure that things are there. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, across the board, whether it's Nashville or back home or I was in Richmond, Virginia for a little bit, like I'm just not seeing this massive slowdown. I'm seeing what I am seeing is, I'm seeing, um, you know, a lot of stores that I go to with hiring signs.
Mm.
I see a massive drain on plumbers and HVAC guys.
Yeah.
There's not enough of them, and I think that, and even the CEO of Ford,
Yeah.
Farley says,
I saw
I've
that.
got I got 5,000 jobs that pay 120 grand a year.
Can hire. It's crazy.
Can't hire for them. So, guys, I'd love to ask the question of the audience: what are you doing if you're not making 120 grand a year? Like, are you that diametrically opposed to a career change and being a mechanic? I can promise it's not nearly as dirty as it used to be.
Right. No, I agree with that. The other thing that I think is interesting about this time is if you are an investor and you happen to be in a market where there's some builders looking to sell, it's a time to strike. Again, a lot of builders are on the quarterly 90-day plan, and
Yep.
we've got about 40 days left in the year. 40 days left in the year, about.
Yeah.
And you can still ink a deal and close it this year. Get a big discount. Get them to freaking loan you the money, right?
Yeah.
Right. So again, you do have a time to strike if this happens to be what you want to do. I am talking to a couple of builders actively to see if we can't ink something before the year is up. But it's I don't think builders are panicking. I think they're making strategic moves. And the other thing that's really interesting, a couple of home builders, I think it was LSI and it might have been Polte. Both their CEOs on their earnings call said that housing inflation is down, meaning
Hmm.
labor is
Yep.
cheaper and
Yep.
supplies are cheaper. And I
Yep.
just checked yesterday, and lumber is at a year low. And if you
Yep.
guys don't realize, lumber is a big component of housing.
A little bit.
So, yeah, just a little bit. So it's really interesting. Builders are pulling back, right? They're doing 4 instead of 40, like you said. So,
Yep.
but they're doing them cheaper. It's
Yeah.
it's shocking to me that where we've seen inflation for the last 3 or 4 years, at least in housing at the moment, the inputs are going down. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and one of the, our friend Simon, the uneducated economist, working in a lumberyard and being a buyer for a lumberyard,
Yeah.
he sees a lot of that. And so, at its peak, it was, $1,600 per thousand board feet.
Wow.
And now we're in the fours. Last time I looked, we were in the fours.
That's
So how
crazy.
are you going to tell me that pricing, now that pricing was sticky, obviously on the way down, because
Mhm.
people were okay with building some inventory. They were okay with having some of that stuff in stock. The lumber yards were okay with being back to normal thresholds,
Mhm.
all of that sort of stuff. But now we're seeing that pricing is actually coming down on some of these things. Sheetrock was extremely expensive. CDX was $80 a sheet, and
Wow.
now it's back in the 20s. 2x4s, same exact thing. Now we're back in the $3 range for kiln dried. That was a $12, what they call a stick. That was a $12 stick previously.
Wow.
So how can stuff go from 12 to 3 and not actually show up in the bottom line and in the bill?
Yeah. Yeah,
It
it's
does. It
math.
does. It
It's
does
just
come
math.
down. It's just math. And I know that
Yeah.
many, unkindly saying, many liberals don't do math very well. But that's the biggest challenge that I see. And with other friends that I have that, aren't of the same persuasion that I am, they're just like, oh yeah, look at all these costs. I said, they're down. They're
Yeah.
down. They're factually
It's
speaking, they're
it's
down.
it's funny you bring that up because for a long time, right? We own a fair amount of real estate, and everything was more expensive. Roofs,
Yes.
windows, all this
Everything.
stuff. But the last 4 to 6 weeks, I'm getting competitive bids, and they're 25 to 30% lower. Now, some of that's probably because they just don't have the backlog anymore. They're
Yep.
not there. They want to keep their teams busy, but even in the, like I had a roof quote that was, God, I think it was like 40% lower than the last roof I did. It was roughly the same size.
Yeah.
So it does seem like stuff's coming down.
It definitely is. 30-year architectural shingles, ice and water shield, all that stuff is down from where it was at the peak. And then to that end, guys are far more interested now. It's back to a normal market
That's
where
what I
they
think it is. Yeah.
where they can where they recognize that you and I can pick somebody else to do the job. And so they actually have to put a best foot forward.
Yeah.
It's not our privilege anymore to have them on site. They,
I
you
think
know,
you're
they,
right. Yeah.
and that's absolutely the way it was. I mean, we held off doing a couple of roofs and we just said, listen, normally when a roof's in this condition, we replace it, but we're going to repair it for now. We're just going to
Right.
repair for now because the repair is
We'll
$1,000
buy
and
a
the job
season.
was
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Exactly. All we were looking for, the guy's like, well, this isn't going to last more than a couple of years. I said, that's perfect. I'll
That's
be
all I
ready
need.
to do that roof right when you need me to do that roof and you have no other
Exactly.
jobs. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Good call.
It's interesting to watch that as the economy swings. I agree with you. I think the one thing that I consistently get wrong is just how fast stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that pricing's been down on lumber for probably a year, maybe a little bit more. And now we're finally starting to see it really kind of dig in,
Really.
take effect.
Yeah.
And we're
It'll be
seeing it on
interesting.
LVP floors, everything.
It'll be interesting on lumber because again, I get all this stuff from Simon, right? The Uneducated Economist. Follow his channel, but at some point, and it's already happening, mills are shutting down, which
Yes.
could create this vacuum or air gap of product. Which come spring, right? You go to the spring, right? We get through the winter. It's March 7th, and we have slightly lower rates. A housing emergency gets flipped or whatever, and it's like, where's the lumber? This could be a problem.
No, it's exactly right. And it's that, as you see some of those things start to develop, we've seen production of certain things, of certain systems, of certain parts of systems be you can't get them. So Samsung and LG, people that have taken my course know that I rail against those guys because they're impossible to fix and their shelf life isn't that good. But boy, they know how to package and box that stuff in the big box stores and make it inexpensive for people. I promise you, you're going to pay eventually. Yeah. So I have systems that are 6 and 7 years old that I bought before I really did all my research, and I am replacing them. And I'm replacing them not with Samsung and not with LG, but I have my own little graveyard of 6 or 8 machines that are sitting there that are parts donors for other stuff that fails. And we've already been able to pull parts off there. But this is what I mean, again, pricing is coming down, and that's a good thing for everybody.
There you go. Well, you are the man on the ground. You're helping people with your boot camps and all of that stuff. Where can people find you?
Lumberjack Landlord on YouTube and on Instagram. And just some real cool stuff that we've got coming in the next few weeks.
Very cool. Thank you, buddy. Take care.
Thanks, Mike. You